Good afternoon, students. Today we are going to discuss principles of inclusive education. Each children or each child should have the opportunity to experience meaningful challenges, exercise choice and responsibility. Interact collaboratively with others and be actively engaged in developmental, academic, non-academic, inter and intrapersonal activities as part of the educational process. So implementation of the plans, programs and actions depend upon continuous community support, broad planning, training and evaluation. An adapted school environment is needed to suit the needs of every child with disabilities. There is also a need for restructuring of the concept of special education and general education. Remember, both special education and general education as a dual system. So certain important principles of inclusion are as follows: sharing of responsibilities of functionaries working at different levels, coordination among them, providing additional support to children, development a collaborative framework to meet the additional needs and interests of children. Implications for various types of disabilities, knowledge about family and social environment of children, which is must. Family background, a teacher must know family background of a child, social environment of a child, so that he or she can help them out, counsel them, and discuss with them or tell them how to cope up with their situation, how to cope up with their environment. So it is needed. And modification in teaching learning strategies, modalities. Modifications in teaching learning strategies and modalities as per requirement of the learner. Improving professional competencies of teachers. Ensuring community support and support of other functionaries working at different levels. The process of inclusion starts with the planning of education for all children under regular education in the classrooms. The process of inclusion starts with the planning of education for all children under regular education in the classrooms, which is least restrictive. Children with disabilities need improvement in cognitive and social development and motor skills, physical motor skills. All functionaries associated with with school should share this responsibility and come together to support all children. Collaborative support of the school staff to meet the unique needs of all children is essential. Equality, sense of belongingness, respect for each other, need-based support and diversity are some of the features of the inclusive school. Rights and needs of children need to be considered in determining how and when to include children with disabilities in the school programs. So far as the provision of individualized education program is concerned, it is based on intensity of service required. Inclusive education strategies involve adaptation in strategic plans, policies, classroom management, teaching strategies, and curricular transactions. Family and social circumstances of children are crucial to inclusion of children with disabilities. Main features of inclusive education are equality. Equality, all learners are equal. Or equalizing opportunities, equalizing resources, learning together, learn together. All learners learn together irrespective of their limitations. Support, which is need based, as per need, valuing diversity rather than looking at it as barrier, as problem. So, valuing diversity is important. Sense of belongingness, another important feature of inclusive education. Now let's talk about models of inclusive education for children with disabilities. In any ideal situation of inclusive education, the general education itself makes the education of children with disabilities as its integral part. In any ideal situation of inclusive classroom, inclusive setup, the general education itself makes the education of children with disabilities as its integral part. This implies that the teacher should be equipped with skills to address the educational needs of children with disabilities to a minimum extent at least. This implies that the teacher should be equipped with skills, address the educational needs of children with disabilities to a minimum extent at least. This calls for strengthening the pre-service teacher preparation program with adequate component of inclusion of children with disabilities. Thus, inclusive education creates effective classroom. Remember, inclusive education creates effective classroom where the educational needs of all children are addressed. Educational needs of all children are addressed irrespective of their ability. Total inclusion occurs when general classroom teachers take most of the responsibilities of the classroom. Total inclusion occurs when general classroom teachers take most of the responsibilities of the classroom. If a specialist takes care of the children with disabilities in general classroom, it is not total inclusion. So what is total inclusion and what is only inclusion or partial inclusion? Total inclusion occurs when general classroom teachers take most of the responsibilities of the classroom. If a specialist takes care of the children with disabilities in a general classroom, like for visually impaired children or or hearing impaired children. So, if a specialist taking care of the children with disabled students or disabilities in a general classroom, it is not total inclusion. So there is no clear consensus in the field about the models to be practiced in the educational institutions. Some educational thinkers institutions are in favor of full inclusion model and others are in favor of partial inclusion. So let's discuss them in brief. First model of First is model of full inclusion. The strong movement towards inclusive education demands full-time inclusion of children in regular education system. The strong movement towards inclusive education demands full-time inclusion of children in regular education system. This model calls for providing support to every type and degree of disability in the regular classroom. The strong movement towards inclusive education demands full-time inclusion of children in regular education system. This model calls for support to every type and degree of disability in the regular classroom. Needless to say, co-curricular activities also must be adapted to cater to the needs of all the children admitted in the school. Proper assessment and planning has to be made for every activity to be enjoyed by a child who may require special attention or adaptation. Some types or some kinds of adaptations in the classroom functioning facilitate full inclusion, which I am going to discuss with you one by one. First is cooperative learning, a very effective way of including children with disabilities in a regular classroom. This is an cooperative learning. This is an effective way of including children with disabilities in a regular classroom. Here, children in heterogeneous small groups work together towards a specific goal. Children in heterogeneous small groups work together towards a common goal or specific goal. But before making the groups, peers and deliberately trained to help a particular academic skill to children with disabilities. Instructional adaptations and accommodations. Instructional adaptations and accommodations. Instruction may be modified for the learner with disabilities. Instruction may be modified for learner with disabilities. Modifications usually take the form of modified assignments or modified instructional strategies. Modifications usually take the form of modified assignments or modified instructional strategies. Children with disability feel comfortable in the groups as the modification is made to suit their needs. Children with disability feel comfortable in the group as the modification is made to suit their needs. Training general education teachers. General education teachers are content expert. They are generally believed to be content expert, but they are not well versed with the special needs of children with disability because they are not trained in that area. So they are expert with general things, expert with general content, general teaching, but they are not well versed with the special needs of children. Even they are not able to take care of psychological needs of children with disabilities. So some kind of training is needed to prepare them and to deal with such children. So special education teachers usually lack expertise in teaching an individual subject. So there is limitation. Keeping this in mind, the general education teachers are given additional training in the area of specific disabilities and the special instructional needs. Practical difficulties to full inclusion. Labeling. There is a possibility that some children with disabilities feel inferior due to their deviant conditioning. There is a possibility that some children with disabilities feel inferior due to their deviant conditioning. This may lead to poor self-esteem in the child and hinder the child from taking part in other activities of the school. Special instructional needs. Few children with disabilities, depending on the type and severity of their disability, call for special material and method in the instructional setting. It may be feasible to provide those in our regular school. Thus, regular schools may not be the ideal place for the practice of inclusiveness. Stigma of groupism. Children with disability may be viewed as a group, and this will divert the attention from the individual. They may be treated as yet another minority group, adding to the already existing groups in the society. Attitude of general educators. Most teachers in the general stream feel that they are not capable of handling children with disabilities. Teachers already have a tedious job of catering to a large number of students, taking care of their needs, etc. So, due to this overburdening situation, they are unwilling to do extra work. They are not willing to do extra thing. It results in negative attitude of teachers and heads of institutions towards taking children with disabilities. Now let's talk about full inclusion. It is clear that full inclusion calls for total preparedness on the part of the school authorities. This model requires the classroom environment to be fully conducive for learning for all the children. The physical environment should be modified to suit the needs of children. For example, in case of a child having hearing impairment, there are certain prerequisites to be kept in mind while admitting the child to a regular education. Some of the points are as follows. Early at this stage, early intervention is important. It is essential that hearing impairment is identified and intervened before the age of 6 months. Suitable hearing device has to be used after proper diagnosis and medical intervention if it is necessary. Training towards listening has to begin early to make up for the delay in auditory input. Development of age appropriate language and social skills. Models of Model of partial inclusion. These models came as a viable option to full inclusion. Some educators are in favor of these models as this is more practical. Unlike in case of full inclusion, the system of education and the teachers adjust, prepare to handle the child with disability. The child is in the classroom throughout as per the ideology of inclusion. The partial inclusion models were suggested by Hallahan, Kaufman and Pullen. Hallahan, Kaufman and Pullen. Collaborative consultation. In this approach, a special educator and a general educator collaborate to identify teaching strategies for a student with disability. Regular meetings are scheduled between the two. The relationship between the two professionals is based on the premise of shared responsibility and equal authority. Special educator will see the child in a resource room or the setting or other setting. A change to the instruction is suggested to the regular classroom teacher, which is practiced in the classroom along with the regular plan of the teacher. Special educator helps the student to practice newly acquired skills and reteach difficult skills. This model is suitable for an area where there is low incidence of students with special needs. If a school has got lesser number of students with special needs, this is a very useful model. In collaborative consultation, a specialist will provide support to the general education teacher. Teaming model. A team is assigned to each grade level. A period per week will be assigned to the team for planning. A period per week will be assigned to the team for planning. Team members meet with special educators on a regular basis. In the meeting, the special educators provides information like the possible instructional strategies. A team in teaming model, a team is assigned for each grade level. A period per week will be assigned to the team for planning. Team members meet with the special educators on a regular basis. In the meeting, the special educator provides information like the possible instructional strategies, modifications, and ideas for assignments of students depending on the requirement of each team. This model is suitable when student to teacher ratio is high. But the special educator gets limited opportunities to work in general education classroom for the children with disabilities. A special educator and a general educator will teach the now next is cooperative teaching or collaborative teaching. A special educator and a general educator will teach the diverse group of students in the same classroom. Both educators are responsible for instructional planning. Both educators are responsible for instructional planning and delivery, student achievements, assessment, and discipline. Commonly, it looks like one teacher is teaching and the other is assisting. So it looks like one per teacher is teaching and the other teacher assisting. In reality, both of them would have worked together before the class. So both of them would have worked together before the class, keeping in mind the requirement of the children who need special attention to learn the particular concept. Students receive age appropriate academic support services and possible modified instruction. There are minimum scheduling problems as general educators and special educators work together. This fosters continuous and ongoing communication between educators. So, students receive age appropriate academic support service and possible modified instructions. There are minimum scheduling problems as general educators and special educators work together. This fosters continuous and ongoing communication between educators. This model is appropriate when the student to teacher ratio is small, and this takes care of more number of children with disability included. In a class, the model of inclusive education can be suitably implemented for education of children with hearing impairment, keeping in view the severity of their impairments. Adequate environment for their learning and for their social and emotional involvement with their age mates, keeping inclusively philosophy alive. Now, challenges for inclusion. What are the challenges? Adequate academic as well as administrative support is the key for the success of inclusion with children with disability in general. The purpose of inclusion will not be served simply by enrolling these children. The basic challenges confronted by the stakeholders associated with inclusion are school reform, mindset of teachers, parents and community, curricular adaptations for effective classroom process, capacity building of teachers and other functionaries, adapting need-based instructional strategies, provision of adequate human resource, developing collaborative learning. So the various challenges of inclusion are being discussed, like academic readiness, which is lacking generally, physical readiness, emotional readiness, trained teachers, education process, etc. In our next session, we will discuss about innovations in inclusive education.